National Security Advisor Major General Babangana Mungunu, retired, says the desire of President Muhammadu Buhari is to hand over a safer country to his successor next year. The NSA said this when he appeared before the House of Representatives Committee on National Security and Intelligence to defend the 2023 budget of his office. Mungunu says achieving the immediate goal of ensuring a secure nation will require the collective support of the parliament. He says insecurity is not peculiar to Nigeria as it remains a global menace. Earlier in his remarks, the chairman of the House Committee on National Security and Intelligence, Honorable Shaban Ibrahim Sharada, had charged the NSA and all security agencies to ensure that the country is safe during and after the 2023 elections. All right.
It is hoped that the relationship would be deepened to achieve the objectives of the national security reforms as the 9th House of Representatives is approaching the end of its tenure.
Insecurity that confronts us is not peculiar just to Nigeria, but it's a global thing. And in today's context, we can only overcome this problem when we recognize the importance of intelligence as being the driver, the propellant of all activities in a whole of society approach. It is important that all the problems I present are taken into consideration by this very, very important committee.
All right. A lot to chat about this morning, Dr. Bati.
Okay, let me put it like this. Security is clearly the most important challenge that we face as we move towards the general elections in 2023. The fear of violence, the fear of disruptions. And you recall that when the president of Nigeria was launching the Armed Forces Emblem Remembrance Day, poppycock, he made the point that his administration is committed to ensuring that there is peace before transition and also after. The Chief of Staff had also previously made a similar statement. And then also, last Friday, exactly a week ago, at a meeting of the Interconsultative Committee on Electoral Security, ICES, this Inspector General of Police, National Security Advisor, General Babangana Mungunu, made the same point and said that the security agencies have been given express instruction, directive, and permission by the President of Nigeria to deal decisively within the ambit of the law with anybody who violates the electoral process. Now, again, that was also an acknowledgement on his part of the fact that violence, threats to the electoral process constitute the major problem that Nigeria faces at the moment. Now, yesterday also, the Inspector General of Police at the police headquarters in Abuja had a meeting with the chairman of the political parties, and he made the same point about how the police is committed to gathering intelligence, cooperating with other security agencies to ensure that we have a peaceful transition. Fourth, we have also been told by the Inspector General of Police and by the National Security Advisor's Office that the federal government has deployed various agencies to INEC offices across the country. The military, the Department of State Services, members of the Civil Defense Corps to address the challenge of violent attacks on INEC facilities. So these are some of the things that government has done. And in fact, it was interesting hearing the Inspector General of Police adding to all of these concerns about the threat of violence, the fact that there are 3 levels of violence, in terms of threat: intra-party and inter-party violence, violence induced by the general community in terms of misinformation, disinformation, hate speech. And we see a lot of that, during campaigns. We've seen a lot of that right now. And third, the Inspector General of Police identified the governors as being part of the problem in trying to sponsor thugs and subnational security outfits to subvert the process one way or the other. So in this video that has been shown, we have the National Security Advisor reiterating the same position he held a week ago at ICES, that the government is committed to ensuring peaceful transition. If indeed it is true that security personnel have been deployed to all the 242 affected units in Katsina State and all the 8,809 registration areas in the country, nationwide, then of course it means that the government, appears to be serious about this. But at the end of the day, Nigerians will expect that all the stakeholders involved in this process will play their part. That one, the political parties will eschew violence. That two, the security agencies will keep to their promise to ensure that sections 92 and 93 of the Electoral Act 2022 as amended. Electoral Act 2022 deals with punishment for electoral offenders. So the NSA, beyond making this promise, will it live to its own promises that the security agencies will deal decisively with those who want to subvert the democratic process in 2023. And in this regard, we expect that there will be no witch hunting, that there will be no victimization, and that the security agencies themselves will maintain utmost professionalism, as President Muhammadu Buhari urged the senior police officers to do so at a conference, at a retreat of senior police officers in Owerri before his trip, recent trip to the United Kingdom. Clearly, violence, threat of violence is a problem. How they deal with it is what is important. And I think that it's just for us as Nigerians to wait and see. But for the average electorate, for that average thug who thinks that this is the time for him to make money, no. As Dele Farotimi has reminded us in a title of his book, do not die in their war. Because we've seen footages of politicians, in spite of the differences between them, drinking tea together at airports, either at the Nnamdi Azikiwe airport or at the Lagos airport or at the Aminu Kano International Airport. Those politicians, they will still sit down and drink tea and exchange pleasantries before, during, and after the elections. If you allow them to hire you as a thug for peanuts, then of course you may well die in their war. But what the federal government of Nigeria is telling you is do not be used as agents of violence. Allow yourself to be used as agents of progress and development. And the best way you can do that is to get your PVC and on election day, make an informed choice. Nigeria will not disappear because of any individual's ambition. In 2027, we will still be here to do the same analysis, to see people vote, and Nigeria will not disappear. That is just a simple common sense that everyone should lend himself or herself.
So I think one thing is certain, apart from the rhetoric, apart from saying we'll leave a nation that is safe before transition, safer, you should look at what is on ground. What is on ground currently is the fact that insecurity has increased tremendously, and we can't deny that. What is on ground is that despite the effort by the security agencies, it's not going further as regards addressing the concerns. Just this morning, I got a report about the Long Bridge in Lagos. People were attacked there. Kidnappings almost happened. And you see constantly this situation reported every part of the country. Recently, the police procured some drones to be able to map the country properly and all of that. But apart from procurements, I think we should have a multi-pronged approach to the insecurity problem. There are some really important elements of state that we must use. And the fact that we've not used this enough brings a lot of problem. The fact that we've not addressed our economic situation definitely feeds into the insecurity in this country. And that's why I'm happy. The next story we're going to take talks about poverty. That the data is out there to show that there's massive poverty in Nigeria, over 63%. And when you see things like that, there's no how you can remove it from insecurity. Also, the welfare of the security apparatus, the security agencies and all of that. How we even map out our security architecture. How we constantly review threats for our country. These are the things, and you see, these things, there's a method to this madness. And if we do right, we'll be able to see results. I don't want to say it's time for us to go back to the drawing board, but we need to introspect and be honest with ourselves as regards those processes. And that's how we can truly make our country safe. The rhetoric is good, which is part of diplomacy, but we need to do a whole lot more. A 2022 Multidimensional Poverty Index survey carried out by the National Bureau of Statistics has revealed that 133 million Nigerians, representing 63% of the population, are poor. Our rights correspondent Georgina Ndukwe Ezenika has details of this report.
Since the launch of the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index in 2010, several countries, including Nigeria, have used it as a model to measure their own poverty index. In November 2020, at the height of the coronavirus pandemic, Nigeria began the process of conducting its Multidimensional Poverty Index survey, becoming the first African country to do so. Here, the final result of the survey is being launched. The Statistician General of the Federation highlights the indices used.
With the largest sample size of 56,610 households that we selected across 109 senatorial districts in 36 states and federal capital of the Federation. We in Nigeria added a fourth dimension to this global one, which we call work and shocks. This fourth dimension, as well as the indicator under it, such as food security, water reliability, underemployment, security shocks, and school life, they were added to reflect the current realities and priorities of Nigeria.
According to the survey, 86 million of the poor people in Nigeria, that is 65%, live in the north, while nearly 47 million of the poor, which represents 35%, live in the southern region of the country.
To ensure the sustainability of this new multidimensional way of addressing poverty, the MPI has been adopted as the key policy tool and measurement method, complementing income-based measurement for poverty within the medium-term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025.
Intervention should really be tailored to the deprivation profile of each state, if not lower, making them our interventions of support efficient and of higher impact. And then secondly, child poverty is an urgent priority. 2/3 of children are multidimensionally poor, according to the national MPI.
The MPI 2022 will certainly help government at all levels, as well as development partners that we are, to allocate funds to benefit all those in need and develop the necessary support services.
President Muhammadu Buhari, who unveiled the report, said as part of measures to reduce poverty level in the country, an executive bill to give a legal framework to the National Social Investment Program is to be sent to the National Assembly soon. The president, represented by his chief of staff, Ibrahim Gambari, says the MPI result will serve as both a measurement and a policy tool to monitor progress at achieving this goal.
The results are not ends by themselves, by no means, but they're really a call for action and a call for targeted action in many dimensions. This is a report that pinpoints the level of deprivations and its intensity that confronts our citizens, all of them. Beyond this, it also provides substantive evidence of the positive impact of the multi-sectoral interventions of the Buhari administration.
Stakeholders here say the MPI data should be regularly updated. If all measures recommended in the report are effectively implemented, the aim of alleviating poverty in the country may become a reality in the nearest future. Georgina Ndukwe, Arise News.
All right, the United Nations World Population Prospect for 2022 places Nigeria as 6th most populous country in the world with 216 million and 4th most populous with a projected of 375 million by 2050. Arise business correspondent Oye Sunday in this report investigates to see if this calls for merry or worry.
The last conducted census in Nigeria was in 2006. The population was put at 140.43 million people. In the past few years, the country's population is set to be over 200 million. The United Nations World Population Prospect for 2022 projects that there are 216 million people in Nigeria, making it home to 2.7% of the global population and 6th most populous nation in the world.
I don't think it's an accurate number, and I'm guessing that the real number is lower than 219 million. Whether it's 10 million lower or 30 million lower, I'm not sure. But whatever the number is, we're a big country. Whether we're going to be the 3rd largest population country, some people say, or not, I'm not sure. But I think the focus of the government should be, one, is making sure that we continue to develop in the sense of education in particular, healthcare in particular for women and children. And that's one of the major drivers for women to have less children. There's higher rates of children surviving, and then people have less children. As they urbanize, they have less children. As they're more educated, they have less children. So those things the government should focus on.
While Nigeria maintains its bragging rights as the most populous nation on the African continent, could the rising number be a cause for worry?
We should be concerned about our population growth rate. Because what it does is that no matter how much you're growing, unless you're growing at 10, 12%, you're actually taking away from the living standards of our people.
A cross-section of Nigerians agree with the professor.
You cannot cater for yourself and giving birth to like 12, 15 children. Come, it's very bad. What do you want them to do? At times, you just leave the children out the streets. It's not right.
I really think there should be a legislation to checkmate it. We can take a cue from China, which at a point they found out that they couldn't contain it. So they brought up legislations, incentives to make people not to have multiple children and multiple births. So I think that's the way to go.
The chief economist at PwC, however, disagrees. He believes that adopting China's one-child policy, which spanned between 1980 to 2016, is not only draconian, but counterproductive in the long run.
We don't need to go to that because we've seen so many other countries, India I've cited, Thailand, Brazil. If you simply have women in particular more educated, they're going to take more control of their reproductive futures. And of course, as the population gets wealthier, they realize it's important for the kids to be educated to be able to participate fully in the economy, which means that you have less children because you can't necessarily afford to put so many kids through school or support them in that way. So it's a natural process that's happened in many, many countries.
A few others say the number of children they have or plan to has little or no impact on Nigeria's economic woes.
No, I don't think to reduce population is a very good something, because like me, I'm the only child of my mother, and she wished me to born plenty because she did not succeed to born plenty. I have to do that. If I have opportunity, I will born plenty, because like me, I will born like 6.
But with headline inflation at 21.5%, food inflation at 23.7%, driven by disruption in the supply of food products, increase in the cost of importation due to persistent currency depreciation and high energy cost, Nigeria's rapidly growing population could be detrimental to its economic and social development. Checking Nigeria's growing population or not will make an interesting debate. But population and economic experts say one incontestable fact remains that a large population without requisite education or skills is a disaster in the making. The United Nations projects that world population could grow to 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050, and 10.4 billion in 2080. Now that tells us that as long as the natural right of humans to reproduce is uninterrupted, Nigeria and the world will continue to welcome new humans. Now how the government chooses to use this growing number to its advantage is a bigger issue unaddressed in Nigeria. However, what you choose to do with your natural right to reproduce is up to you and yours. Oye Sunday, Arise News.
Well, a lot to chat about.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Let me look at it this way. I think the two subjects are related. In one breath, we're talking about poverty, the multidimensional poverty index released by the National Bureau of Statistics. And then the report by Onye Sunday indicating that Nigeria's population has grown to about 216 million. In 2021, Nigeria's population growth was projected to be about 211.4 million. And now in 2022, we're at 260 million. It's projected to be even much higher, to get to about 250 million by 2024, 2025. Now, and then poverty too is rising. According to the NBS report, as has been pointed out, poverty in the north is about 65%. In the south is 45%. In rural areas, it's 65%. In urban areas, it's about 35%. All those disaggregations notwithstanding, the truth of the matter is that we are all poor. If 133 million Nigerians out of either 211 million or 216 million as projected, are poor, then of course it means that we are all very poor in Nigeria. And then, of course, population is growing. That means the population of the poor will also continue to grow. And what that reminds me of, why I said the two are related, is Thomas Malthus, who wrote in 1798 an essay on the principle of population. Thomas Malthus' proposition was basically a mathematical proposition about population, where he was saying that while population grows geometrically, food resources will grow arithmetically. It was discredited by many persons who said it was projecting apocalypse. But again and again, either in Ireland or elsewhere, the Malthusian theory of population has been proven to be true. And so we're in a world now where, in fact, the agricultural projection stated by Malthus is not really the main issue. There are also other issues. Energy has been an issue. Oil and gas has been an issue. Electricity has been an issue. Human consumption has been an issue. Recently, the UNFPA indicated that the world's population has reached 8 billion mark. And so we keep increasing, but in terms of resources, the entire world has not been able, to meet its targets. So the question, therefore, will be, what do you do at the level of policy to deal with all of this? If poverty is so high in the rural areas, is so high in the northern part of the country, and 133 million people in Nigeria are poor. People who are poor, they are classified as people living on less than $1 a day. So what is government doing about it? The federal government of Nigeria says it has a national poverty reduction strategy. What effect has that national poverty reduction strategy has on the poverty index in Nigeria, which we are told is multidimensional? And the multidimensionality, as indicated by the National Bureau of Statistics, has to do with nutrition, has to do with access to healthcare, access to education, access to basic infrastructure, in other words, social protection. So all of these are factors that circumscribe our lives. So that report in itself is an indication of the failure of policy over the years, not by one government, but governments, successive governments. It's an indication at a higher level of leadership. And it is a call to action, as Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the Chief of Staff to the President of Nigeria, pointed out, a call to action in the sense that whoever is going to become President of Nigeria in 2023 will have to realize that apart from dealing with the challenge of insecurity, that poverty, walking on four legs, is one of those major problems that he has to deal with. So what is the policy projection? What are we going to do? For example, about water sanitation. Nigeria being one of those leading countries with regard to open defecation. School attendance is a problem. Food security is a problem. As the population continues to grow matutinally, geometrically, then of course the problem of poverty will continue to be compounded. And so what we are faced with is a situation that we cannot sweep under the carpet with rhetoric or with indifference or with the desperation of politicians thinking that they can come talk to us with sugar-coated rhetoric and think that these issues are not out there in the front burner. I hope the various political parties will take these revelations with the National Bureau of Statistics with regard to poverty and with regard to inflation, which is now 21.09, and with regard to the crisis of revenue that Nigeria faces, to see how these problems can be dealt with.
So, there have been extensive books written about poverty. The one that comes to mind is Banerjee, the Indian Nobel laureate, and we know what poverty is when you read those insights. Poverty spans across everywhere. But there is no silver bullet to poverty other than good policies and politicians that don't weaponize poverty. The reason for Nigeria's poverty is that politicians have weaponized it for their own political interest. The day we stop the weaponization, the day poverty stops. Look at the numbers. Poverty spread across 133 million people and in a population of 216 million. Why are we not meeting development quotas? Because we've not invested in the people. A country that doesn't even have a census in a while, that's just going to do a census next year for over 13 years, how's it going to plan for its people? A country that has all the development indices stacked up against them. A country that's got over 20 million out-of-school children. Primary school completion rate is another thing. The number is going up to over 50% now. A lot of people don't complete primary school again. So the educational outcomes are bleak, nutritional outcomes are bleak, then definitely what you have is full-scale poverty. And I'm not surprised because President Muhammadu Buhari 2 years ago said he's got a roadmap to bring in 100 million people out of poverty. What we have done after that roadmap is to add more million people to poverty. And why? Because of massive corruption. You can hear about the Accountant General stealing a lot of money, looking for a plea bargain, and things like that. But you see, Darren Acemoglu wrote a book. He says why nations fail. Why nations fail because their leaders make them fail. Pure and simple. Why is Nigeria poor? Because its leaders over the years have made it poor by weaponizing poverty. The day we wake up and get leadership right, and that's why I say 2023 elections matter a great deal, then Nigeria will change. That's why you must go out there and vote your conscience. Also, Amartya Sen, another Nobel laureate, another well-respected writer, wrote a book and said something. He said, development as freedom. It's a good book. You could go get it and read it by Amartya Sen. It is only development that can bring true freedom in our society. Are we free in our Nigerian society today? Freedom has been hampered because there's no development and all the development parameters are low. Human Development Index, low. And I'm happy that this report was done by the National Bureau of Statistics so that people will not contest it and say, oh, it's some phony report from somewhere. This is the time to interrogate further and do something. Nigeria's quest for energy transition received a boost on Wednesday when indigenous firm UTM Offshore Limited signed agreements with 3 technical partners for Nigeria's first floating liquefied natural gas facility. The agreement was signed at a brief, colorful event at Hilton Park Lane, London. Details are in this report.
The 3 technical partners include Kellogg Brown and Root KBR UK, Japan Gas Corporation JGC, and Technip Energies Limited, with an agreement to commence the front-end engineering design for UTM Offshore Limited. The contract signing ceremony is a follow-up to the successful execution of the pre-FEED agreement between UTM Offshore Limited and JGC, a leading international engineering design, procurement and construction firm. According to details of the agreement, the front-end engineering design contract with the three firms entails various studies to be conducted for UTM Offshore Limited to figure out technical issues and estimate rough investment costs for the FLNG facility prior to the engineering, procurement and construction phase of the project. This phase is planned to last for 10 months. Speaking at the signing ceremony, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of UTM Offshore Limited, Julius Rune, emphasized that Nigeria is keen on and has been working towards achieving energy transition, which he believes should start with moving from huge dependence on crude oil to gas.
April 30th, 2019, our firm UTM Offshore received the inspiration and due approval support from the late Dr. Makati Barrow.
I hereby commit to achieving the successful completion the field work to the full satisfaction to UTM, maintaining schedule as well as quality.
Just to recall that 50% of worldwide LNG installed capacity has been realized by JGC and Technip.
Today marks a very big step in the progress of this FLNG project, and it itself is a testimony to the relentless driving force of UTM and of Mr. Rone.
The pre-FEED scope was completed within 4 months from the commencement date, with KBR providing due diligence on the JGC scope by conducting a third-party review of all deliverables from JGC during the pre-FEED. It will be recalled that UTM Offshore Limited entered into the pre-FEED agreement with JGC and KBR in May 2021. Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva, who applauded the pioneering efforts of UTM Offshore Limited, said the federal government will continue to support and create enabling environment for business investment in the country, especially in the area of gas development.
UTM Offshore Limited was granted a license to establish by the defunct DPR for the installation of a floating LNG unit on oil mining lease 104, OML 104, in February 2021. We are elated that the UTM Offshore FLNG will be the first of such a project developed by an African company on the continent, even as it will also significantly contribute to the Nigerian government's agenda of reducing the flaring of associated gas across the country.
Given the commitment of our president to this climate change commitment in Glasgow, in COP26, and in Egypt, in COP27, projects of this nature are usually of great interest.
President of African Export-Import Bank, Professor Benedict Oke-Orama, lauded the tenacious and transparent pursuit of the FLNG project by Mr. Rone and his team members at UTM Offshore Limited and pledged the full support for the FLNG project. Professor Orama also applauded President Buhari for optimizing Nigeria's gas resources, which he said came at a time when the traditional investors in oil and gas initiatives are decided to stop funding operations in Africa due to climate change.
As we today sign the FEED work, I believe everybody here will give the desired support, and we in NCDMB are committed to supporting him in line with the provisions of the law.
Nigeria is well positioned, for the energy transition, as gas has been adopted as a transition fuel.
Also at the London event were heads of the regulatory authorities in Nigeria's oil and gas sector who commended the tenacity of Mr. Rone and his team while pledging their continuing support for the UTM FLNG project. In December 2021, UTM Offshore Limited sealed a $5 billion deal with Afrexim Bank for the financing of the Novel projects.